Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzanga. Let's begin to tell you what's been tracking at the moment. 7 ministerial nominees will have the opportunity to defend their capacity to serve in the cabinet during a screening on the floor of the Senate after the exercise was shifted to today due to issues around documentation. Federal High Court Abuja restrains the central bank from further releasing monthly federal allocation to the River State government, says the state 2024 budget was not properly presented. And the chairman of the Dangote refinery asked the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited and marketers to stop importing PMS as he has more than enough to wet the market. Thanks again for joining us on the program. We're coming on air with the latest development in River State politics as Justice Joyce Abdul-Malik of the Federal High Court Abuja stopped the Central Bank of Nigeria from further releasing monthly financial allocation to the River State government. Justice Abdul-Malik held that the receipt and disbursement of monthly allocations since January this year by the River State Governor Siminalayi Fubara was a breach of the Constitution, an aberration that must not be allowed to continue. The judge held that the presentation of the 2024 budget by the Fubara-led government before a 4-member River State House of Assembly was an affront to the constitutional provision. Justice Abdul-Malik further said, and specifically said, that the governor's action was a gross violation of the 1999 Constitution. The judge subsequently restrained the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Accountant General of the Federation, Zenith Bank and Access Bank from further allowing Fubara, that's Governor Fubara, to access money from the Consolidated Revenue and Federation account. So you know the intrigue of Rivers, it never ends. We're also tracking happenings around the National Assembly where any moment from now, 7 ministers designate will take turns to respond to questions from senators during a screening exercise to evaluate their capacity to serve in the federal cabinet. The screening follows an earlier request in a letter to the Senate by President Bola Tinubu to confirm the new minister's nominee or ministerial nominees. Those expected to be screened are Nentawa Yewada, Muhammadu Dangieri, Bianca Odumego Juku, Jumoke Oduwale, Idi Mukhtar Maya, Yusuf Atta, and Suwaida Ahmed, whose portfolios were added for the first time in recent times, as documentation by the nominees by now should have been concluded. And away from that, the governor of Nasarawa State, Abdullahi Sule, has been clarifying issues on the stance of leaders of the northern region of the country on the proposed tax reform bill that was forwarded to the National Assembly. Governor Sule explains that the North's opposition to the proposed bill is because it is unfair to the region and Nigeria cannot thrive or drive growth through value-added tax, but can achieve it via a robust manufacturing sector. He was speaking on our program, Politics Today.
We sat down and took the decision together that looking at this law is going to be unfair to the North. By the time you said you are going to take VAT out of the sharing of the FAC, and then now say that it is going to be shared similar to something like, because that's the understanding we have based on the proposal, it's going to be another 13% derivation. So whatever state that is generating more of the VAT is the state that is going to, so exactly similar to this derivation that you have. So the states that have almost no VAT at the moment will end up actually with the shorter end of the states. And the 19 states of the North are generating very little when it comes to VAT at the moment. And it is very clear. So we're saying the moment you do that, you take it out, and just do not leave it the way it is. Some other states will be unfair. Nobody is against anything. Nobody is worried about you are raising the VAT to so and so percentage, even though the moment you raise it, the producer of the product is going to charge the customer for it at the end of the day. But we're not even talking about that. We are talking about the sharing formula of the VAT. And that's the one that and I think whether we are APC, PDP, APGA, whatever party, We have a right to say that we agree with this or we don't disagree with this. It has nothing to do with disliking anybody or hating anybody or that. No, I think we swore that we are going to be the governors of the northern part of the country. And when we see something that is going against the interests of the northern part, it's our right, to come out and say, no, we dislike this.
In the meantime, President Bola Tinubu is assuring of more stability in the oil sector with the commencement of the Naira for crude transactions. He commended the implementation of the Committee on the Naira-based sales of crude oil and refined products and asked the members to resolve any teething problems, explaining how the Naira was conceived to remove the exchange rate hurdle. Meanwhile, after a meeting with the president, the chairman of Dangote Group, Mr. Aliko Dangote, says he believes fuel queues in the country will disappear if only the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited and other marketers will stop importing the products and buy from him.
I have a refinery. I'm not in the business of retail. If I'm in the business of retail, then you hold me responsible. But what I'm saying is that the retailers should please come forward and pick. If they don't come forward and pick, what do you want me to do? That's nothing that I can do. So I am expecting either NNPC or the marketers to stop importing. They should come and collect. We have what they need. And, as they remove, I'll be pumping. I don't know whether you understand what it takes to keep 500 million liters inside our tank. It's costing me money. Every day, if I will be able to collect the Naira, I can actually charge somebody 32% in interest. So right now, that's what I'm losing. And you are talking about 500 billion. We don't print money, but the issue is that if they come and collect, then you will not see any queues in the filling stations. We have what it takes for them to come and collect. We are not retailers. We also don't have trucks to send. We have a factory, we have where we can load. If they come and pick, they will go and distribute. And they've been doing that with importation. So if they have been doing that with the importation, if it's true they are doing 55 million, I see no reason why they won't come and collect our own and distribute.
All right, so that's Mr. Aliko Dangote talking about this back and forth between him and the NNPCL and importers. I've never seen Alhaji do this much interviews or give presses since he built the refinery. So it's a big one, literally fighting for the survival of that business. But let's hear it plays out. The government has assured him and the marketers. In fact, it's a popular conversation. So that's why it's one of the things we'll talk about today on the program. I'm being joined on the program by the co-founder of Sahara Group, as well as the APC governorship candidate in the last election in Rivers State. Mr. Tony Cole joins me right here in our Lagos studio. Mr. Cole, good to see you in person.
Nice to be here.
Okay, there are so many things to unpack. Let's begin with Rivers State. Just an hour before I came on air.
Why reverse?
No, the reason we have to start with Rivers State, you're a stakeholder. You've been a governorship candidate, so you are part of those voices that we respect in the state, Rivers State. And moreover, just an hour before we came on air, we saw this court order, or I'm not sure what it is, whether it's an order or a judgment, but coming from Justice Abdul Malik, telling the central bank, don't pay Rivers State their federal allocation anymore, because the court has said you presented your budget to 4-member assembly led by Edison Ehie, who is now the chief of staff. Properly present that budget before you can continue expenditure. Whether the government will respect that, the court order or not, it's a different kettle of fish. What's your initial reaction to this?
I think the unfortunate thing here is that the people of Rivers State will continue to bear the brunt of this whole battle between the Honorable Minister and the governor. But it reminds me also of what happened between President Obasanjo at the time, and Lagos State Governor, current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, where there was a restraining, a withdrawal of allocation into Lagos State. And so the governor has one of two choices. The first is to seek if there's any way to find a resolution to this whole brouhaha. I think that's a difficult road to take, but it's one that has to be considered. There are going to be many more court battles down the line. And unfortunately, with all of this, you're not going to see any kind of development happen in Rivers State as long as this continues. The other is what you pointed out. Choose to say that, you know what, we are going to do without the allocations, and let us now look inwards and create an economy that can sustain the state from the inside. It's possible. It's difficult, but it's possible. Whichever way the governor chooses, the one thing that you will have to do is figure out a way as to how to deal with the courts.
So, coincidentally, I was just looking at a few things. Coincidentally, yesterday, budget released their fiscal performance. Rivers came tops, even ahead of Lagos.
Absolutely.
And again, today, October the 30th, marks 1 year since that move to whether impeach him or not to impeach him that led to all the House of Assembly issue. From where you sit, I know that you've tried to intervene in some of the conversations we've had about this whole issue. What exactly can really bring peace and lasting peace? Because this looks like a battle of attrition. Who can last longer and who is going to win at the end of the day? Because 2027 is already in sight, and we're still waiting for the dividend of democracy from the 2023 general election.
It's a tough one. I think at the end of the day, we have to put three groups of people at play. The first are the people of Rivers State, the general public who went to elect and vote and wanted to see something. Unfortunately, they're not even in the equation at all. Whatever is happening now is not even putting the people front and center. And as long as the people are not in the equation, then what we have is what you called the battle of attrition. Who will bleed out the most and who will die first? Now, that is not progress at all. At the end of the day, what we're going to see is that this will continue all the way to 2027, hoping that one of them or both might not even be available when it gets to 2027. And I don't think that's the right way to go. So if you ask me, I would say that at this point, people should look at Rivers State and say, you know what do we do? And what options do we have? What does Governor Fubara fear the most today? What's his biggest challenge? And I would say it's that sword hanging over his head that if these assembly members come, then we're back to that whole issue of impeachment. So impeachment is a problem that has to be dealt with. Somebody has to mediate at the level to say, okay, you know what? Impeachment is off the table. Let's leave impeachment. Because that's the only way that I think he will be comfortable to deal with whether the 27 members come back into the House or not. Then you have the 27 members that have to come. Their own issue, if they come, is that everybody believes on the Fubara side that as soon as they come, the first thing they're going to do is impeach. So impeachment is an issue. It's the big elephant in the room. And we need to deal with that. Does Governor Fubara have the ambition to fight and take over political powers and destroy the honorable minister's political... That I can't answer. He would have to answer that. But that is the second aspect of the battle.
Oh, let's leave Rivers for a while. I know you can't wait to leave Rivers. But let's come to a broader issue that has to do with the PMS. We're thinking by now, with the upcoming in of Dangote refinery, deregulation of the sector, they already alerted us, maybe by nuances or directly, that look, we can't guarantee that prices will come down, but we can tell you that products will be available. But right now is just a convolution of a lot of things. One, prices are high. Dangote is complaining that they're not buying from him. They are saying prices to buy PMS, especially Ipman and Petron, for instance. They said they used to buy a truck of 45,000 liters for about 7 million naira. Now it's between 47 to 50 million. So they literally have to come together to be able to afford to buy. We thought we would not be having this conversation at this time. Why are we still having this conversation?
The conversation should have started before and not when implementation is going on. So the first thing that would have happened long before Dangote refinery came up, knowing that it was about to happen, would have been to sit down with the major marketers, Moman, the NNPC, Dangote, and work out a plan. Any kind of industry, the day you start it, you will start discovering all sorts of teething problems. There are issues that would happen. If you say that you are able to do, if, for example, you want to produce 1 liter, you may find out from your implementation that all you can produce is less or more. And all of this, you don't begin to tidy up and have the discussions that we're having now when operations have started. And unfortunately, the Nigerian public would have expected, and that's where the whole problem is, that the minute this starts, everything should start getting better. Unfortunately, we did not. That conversation did not happen when it ought to have happened. And now, when having a conversation in operation mode, trying to identify which is the best. Is it Naira? Is it non-Naira? Should importation come or go? And NNPC, I would suspect, being where they are, would not want to see a situation where there is a gap in supply. Dangote says, I can do it. They are saying that, before you do it, let us make sure that there is a buffer so that there is no gap. But that conversation should have happened long before. Eventually, it will sort out, but the public, again, will suffer a bit.
Because the federal government has said, sell him crude with Naira, so that will lower the pressure of 30-40% that is pushing our FX numbers too high. That on one hand is an issue. So why in your view is the NNPCL not lifting or buying PMS directly from Dangote and is still importing? We understand that they place orders till like December for cargoes to come into the country. And there's also the debate of how come it feels like imported products and now, finished products now, is cheaper than the Dangote refinery product. Somebody should help us make sense of the situation. That's why you're here. You're a private sector man.
I wish, so whatever I'm telling you now is just an opinion, not because I have empirical facts and I have not looked at the numbers to say this is true. But from my experience, the first aspect of it is this. Let's assume that NNPC wanted to hand over everything to Dangote from day one and just said, you know what, take it and begin to supply products. There will be an issue, which is what happened the last time, where the software queues coming up and all of that, and everybody began to panic. And I suspect that NNPC in the first instance will say, let us make sure that there is a buffer. That's on the one end. The second aspect of it is, by the time you supply Naira crude, there are other things that now have to be taken into consideration. You have supplied the Naira in crude. It's a lot of Naira that has to be paid immediately. Now, if Dangote pays that Naira to buy the crude, he has to pay in advance, or is he going to pay in arrears? Is he going to wait until the marketers are picking up the crude before he pays all that? It's a lot of crude, and it's a lot of Naira. So all of these are some of the dynamics that I suspect is happening in the background. Do you get credit for the crude, or do you have to pay in advance? If you're paying in advance, it's a lot of Naira that you have to pay in advance. And remember that what is being picked up is being picked up in batches.
Okay.
And so you would have some of those gaps that need to be closed.
It's a very big... I'm trying to look for a way to... Because at the end of the day, for excuse me, for those of us who are end users, we want to see
That's all you care.
cheaper PMS.
That's all.
So
go there, buy it.
We don't understand why you're trying to liberalize the market, decentralize, and things are still quite high. But on the other hand, how long do you think that this conversation has to go on, in your view, from where you sit, that we can begin to see some level of return? Because the bigger elephant in the room is FX. If our foreign exchange, our Naira is strengthened, we're going to get better.
Absolutely.
If you were to advise President Bola Tinubu, what will you be telling him as far as the FX market is concerned? Because that's where the problem is.
FX that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, I digress because it's still dollar Naira issue.
I agree. It's a different conversation. So when the FX is concerned, one of the first things that they tried to do was that the subsidy in itself was taking up a lot of the FX consumption. And hence the Dangote solution to see if they can bring down the FX. Has that translated immediately to what we are seeing? Obviously not. So it's going to take some time with all of this discussion for that to begin. But that's not really where the problem ends up. all the time that petroleum products were being imported and FX was going in that direction, people were also importing other things that ought to have been manufactured here. And so what was happening in that space was that the FX that you couldn't find from the official market, you had to go to the black market to buy. We have not solved that problem. So what you've just done is that by reducing this aspect of it, you have just created more FX demand on the other side. What we need to do is the manufacturing base of Nigeria. There are certain things that we have been importing that we have no business importing.
I'm happy you mentioned that. The question I always ask my guests when it comes to the issue of petroleum, why can't we ramp up production? Thank God you're from River State, from the Niger Delta, where this oil is coming from. If you look at our exports, 74% of our earnings comes from crude oil. And the lower hanging fruit is just for us to ramp up production. Then we can begin to talk of using that money to diversify. What is really the problem? We're not seeing the boys bombing anybody like we used to see before. Yet the numbers are not looking. We can't even meet up the OPEC quota of 1.5.
Okay. And the reason why there's an underlying issue that has to be dealt with. Production within in Nigeria, many years ago, Nigeria used to be one of the cheapest places where you would produce because the oil was relatively easy to extract.
Okay.
What has happened over the last couple of years is that the operational cost for security, for movement, for bases, and all of that has ramped up in Nigeria so much that it's no longer cheap to produce oil in Nigeria. Each time you have to go into the Niger Delta or anywhere where there's an oil production, you have to be concerned about community, who you are taking in, where you are bringing, what type of costs you are paying. So you've just seen a transfer of costs from what never existed before to what you are now seeing today. And as a result of that, production can't ramp up. You see, money...
Is that why they are going deep offshore?
Now you understand it. Money will always find an easier way to go. And if it does not find Nigeria, it will find elsewhere. So we sit down and we're wondering why Shell has sold onshore assets, why ExxonMobil has sold, why ADAX left and all of that. And we think that, oh, that's okay. It's not okay. I'm fully in support for Nigerian companies coming on and developing. That is the way it should be. But that should be not because people are leaving so that they can find an easier way to invest. But let them do that because that's a policy transition, saying that foreign companies come in, they start, and they move, and indigenous companies take over. What we're seeing is an indigenization, not because there's a policy for indigenization that is working, but people are looking at it and saying it is too high and too risky for us to continue here. Let's move.
So if the money bags that are coming from abroad can't face these challenges, do the local guys, do we have the resources to push through?
No, because another thing that I didn't say, which most people know, is that the world is moving away from fossil fuels.
Okay.
And so to get resources, money today, finances, to drill new wells, to drill anything is extremely difficult. So you can't find it. So the money is drying up. You cannot bring in new resources. You cannot ramp up your production. It's too expensive for you to do so. So we're not in a good place. So what should we be doing?
That's the question.
What should we be doing? Oil is not our solution. Oil is not our solution at all. This is the time when we should be sitting down and looking and saying, what else can we do that are foreign exchange earners? So a lot of people use Dubai as an example, and most people are, why Dubai, why Dubai? But let's use Dubai because everybody understands it. Dubai had oil. They looked at it and said, you know what, oil is going to be a problem. We cannot use oil to continue, but we use oil to form the basis for what we want. And they moved the economy to something else. And today, oil does not bring the revenue for
nothing to that effect is showing that we're diversifying. Even though we have over 200 trillion cubic meters of feet of gas. That we're even a gas country than even oil, because our oil is less than 40 billion barrels that we have in terms of reserve. But I have a lot of issues I want you to tackle. The next one has to do with this call by the northern governor saying, look, the distribution formula that the proposed bill, the tax bill, is coming up with, we're not comfortable. So the number one is when they collect VAT, 50% goes to the state and the FCT, 15% goes to the federal government, and of course 35% goes to the local government. But they are saying no. this bill is saying within the calculation, they've increased the derivation such that the man who brings more to the table has to take more. And they are saying that will shortchange us. How should we navigate this conversation? Because it's snowballing into a political conversation than an economic conversation.
Yes, and it should be. But there's a bit more that needs to be discussed outside of what we see in reality. And when you get to the northern economies, one of the things that we need to discuss is what type of tax regime is acceptable in the north. What we don't realize is that there's a tax regime, a tax understanding and mentality with those who are from the south, who just accept that, you know what, tax is something that we can pay and just pay normally. And when you get to the north, there's a religious element about taxation that has to be dealt with. Nobody talks about it. And unless that conversation is had properly, where you then sit down and say, okay, we have a constitution, and the constitution says that this is what we must do. But we also have a religious undertone that deals with taxation on a personal basis. And if the person believes religiously that tax is not something that I ought to pay, or I should pay this type of tax, then you have this issue.
The argument is the fact that they don't have a lot of this. Most of these companies are headquartered in Lagos or Abuja, so where these VATs go to. So since they don't have them in their area and consumption is in their area, why are you telling them to, in fact, they say they can't compete?
For now, today, that's true. And so some of the discussions that I just talked about, the religious aspect of it, which needs to be dealt with. But another aspect of it is that how do you now move a concentration of industries from one end to another? And this is something that must be done. You know, at the end of the day, Nigeria has to sit down and look at where are my competitive advantages and what should I do in various areas that will increase competition in one side such that I can produce for what another side will require.
We're almost totally out of time. Do you know, before I came on the show, I saw a receipt of 1962 where cocoa, groundnuts, palm oil earned more foreign exchange for us than even petroleum. So maybe we need to revisit that. But in closing, let's talk about the ministers that will be screening, because I told you that we have to touch on the issue. Now that I have you, ministers are coming in. First, I want to ask you, do you think that the president did enough in just firing 5? Some people say he should have fired 50% of his cabinet, because there are underperformers all around him. Some are saying the ones that were let go don't have political influence, so they were easy fries to deal with. I don't know what your response would be to that. And what agenda would you be setting for these new guys that are coming? On
the first question, only the president can answer that, because I'm sure he knows what he's...
No, but you are watching the ministers perform. We're seeing some of them are already failures.
There are two different things. So as to what led the president to say that it's only 5 that I want to fire, nobody can answer that.
Okay.
He would have to answer that aspect of it. However, with these ones who have come in, if I was asking them questions from the Senate and they needed to clear themselves and they needed to address Nigerians, the first aspect of it is Nigerians are very dissatisfied right now. They're dissatisfied across board. And so what they want to hear from this 5 is that you coming in, that you coming in, you are coming in with a different type of mindset. You are coming in to solve the problems that
these other ones
did not solve. And that's what they should be answering, because Nigerians are looking for answers desperately.
So at the end of the day, we don't want to say you can bow and go. We know you.
No. It should not be.
I must thank you so much. I wish we had 1 hour, 30 minutes to talk, because I have a lot of questions to ask you. I just had to abridge all of them. Mr. Tony Cole is the co-founder of Sahara Group and also the APC governorship candidate in the 2023 governorship election. Most likely is going to run again. He has said that before. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. And that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics. Bye-bye.